The Young and the Restless Spoilers. Audra Charles had always been a survivor, sharp, ambitious, relentless, but even the strongest predators have moments when the world feels larger than their claws can grasp. Losing the confrontation with Claire was not just a setback, it was a public unraveling she had not prepared for. Claire, who walked around Genoa City with the polished innocence of someone who had mastered the art of manipulating perception, had not simply outplayed Audra. She had humiliated her, flipping the narrative so effortlessly that many believed Audra was the villain and Claire the wronged heroine. And yet, the truth, buried, inconvenient, dangerous, was far more complicated than anyone dared to admit. Claire had Holden backing her, whispering strategies into her ear, shielding her from accountability. Kyle, blinded by guilt, nostalgia, and a misdirected desire to prove himself a good father, had also thrown his support behind Claire, unaware that he was becoming another pawn in her carefully assembled game board. Meanwhile, Audra stood alone, carrying the weight of choices she had made and those she had been forced into, watching as her life began slipping out of her control like sand through trembling fingers. The isolation was suffocating. The judgment was relentless. And the whispers of karma from those who believed she was merely getting what she deserved cut deeper than she would ever admit. Because if everyone saw her as the villain, then why did she feel like she was the only one screaming the truth? Why was she the only one who recognized that Claire was not a victim but a maestro of calculated deceit? Audra had no allies left. No defenders. No one who believed in her version of events. Or so she thought. The turning point of this unfolding tragedy arrived not with a corporate bombshell, not with a courtroom confession, and not with a romantic betrayal, but with the quiet footsteps of a little boy, Harrison Locke, the son Kyle Abbott adored more than life itself. Children, people often forget, may not understand the politics of adults but understand their behaviors better than anyone. They see the contradictions, the inconsistencies, the secret glances, the whispered conversations, the cracks beneath the surface that grown-ups pretend aren't there. And Harrison, observant, sensitive, bright, had been watching everything. He saw Claire sneaking around when she thought no one was paying attention. He heard snippets of conversations she had with Holden, conversations filled with tones that hinted at something more than friendship. He noticed the way Claire acted differently when Kyle wasn't in the room, and the way she became excessively affectionate or overly sweet whenever Kyle returned, as if overcompensating for something she desperately wanted to hide. He saw Holden leaving Claire's room late at night during a family gathering at the Abbott house. He saw Claire delete messages on her phone when she thought he was busy with his toys. He saw lies. Small ones at first, then larger ones, accumulating like stones building a wall of deceit. For days, he didn't know what to do with this information. He was a child, but not a foolish one. He knew telling the wrong person could make things worse. And yet, he also saw Audra, alone, targeted, wrongfully accused, suffering consequences for actions she hadn't committed. He saw her crying silently in the hallway when she thought no one was watching. He saw the way adults spoke to her with cruelty masked as righteousness. And something inside him, something instinctive and deeply moral, whispered that he could not stand by and stay silent. The question remained, where did he get the courage to speak up? Where did he learn that telling the truth mattered even when adults didn't want to hear it? Many suspected that Summer, wise, his patient, compassionate, had a hand in this awakening. Summer had always been someone who valued truth above comfort. And Harrison adored her, trusted her, and absorbed every lesson she taught him about bravery, loyalty, and integrity. Summer never told him to spy or interfere, but she had taught him one thing that mattered more than anything else: if you see someone being hurt unfairly, you speak up even if your voice trembles. So when the moment came, Harrison did exactly that. In a twist no one in Genoa City saw coming, Harrison became the catalyst for everything that followed. He stepped forward. Not dramatically, not with theatrics, but with the quiet sincerity that makes a child's honesty impossible to ignore. In front of Kyle, Summer, and Audra, he revealed what he had witnessed: Claire sneaking out at night. Claire and Holden whispering behind closed doors. Claire kissing Holden when she believed she was alone. Claire telling Holden she only needed Kyle until everything was settled. The room fell silent. The adults froze. And the truth, undeniable, unfiltered, crashed through the fragile illusions Claire had crafted. Kyle's face went white. Betrayal hit him with the force of a wrecking ball. He had defended Claire, believed her lies, protected her reputation, and in doing so, helped paint Audra as the villain. Now he realized he had been manipulated, deceived, and played for a fool. Everything he had built, his emotional stability, his trust, his newly restructured future, fractured instantly. Audra, who had been moments away from being condemned socially and legally, felt the air return to her lungs. This child she barely knew had just handed her the lifeline she never expected to receive. Harrison's revelations were so precise, so consistent, and matched so many unusual inconsistencies in Claire's behavior that even those who despised Audra could no longer dismiss them as lies. What followed was an emotional earthquake. Kyle confronted Claire, demanding explanations she could not fabricate fast enough. Holden, cornered by his own mistakes, tried to intervene but only exposed the depth of their betrayal. Claire's carefully curated persona shredded before everyone's eyes, unveiling the truth of what she had become: manipulative, unfaithful, opportunistic, and entirely devoid of remorse. Audra, after days of humiliation and fear, was finally vindicated. Harrison's testimony, supported by timestamps, overheard conversations, and even small objects he had discreetly collected, cleared her name. She was no longer the villain. No longer the manipulator. No longer the woman walking into a social execution. She walked out of the courthouse not as a criminal, but as a survivor who had been saved not by a legal loophole, not by a strategic ally, but by a child who believed in fairness more than any adult in the room. Kyle, still reeling, struggled to face Summer, knowing she likely understood the truth long before he did. Summer had tried to warn him gently, without telling tales, without breaking confidences. But like so many men before him, Kyle had ignored the intuition of a woman who saw the cracks before they became fractures. Now he saw everything: the damage, the betrayal, the humiliation. And Audra? She was forever changed. Her greatest downfall had nearly destroyed her, but the person who saved her wasn't a lawyer, a lover, or a business ally. It was a little boy with a brave heart. In a world full of adults who lied for convenience and betrayed for power, Harrison stood tall as the only one who dared to speak the truth without expecting anything in return. And in doing so, he didn't just save Audra from prison, he reshaped the balance of power in Genoa City. Because now, Claire's empire of lies had collapsed, Kyle's trust had been shattered, Summer's wisdom had been proven, and Audra, once ostracized, was suddenly standing on higher moral ground than those who had judged her. But the real question remained: what would Audra do with this unexpected redemption? Would she forgive Kyle for abandoning her? Would she confront Claire with the fury she had kept bottled inside? Would she use her vindication to climb higher than before, stronger and more dangerous than ever? One thing was certain: this was not the end. Not for Audra. Not for Kyle. Not for Summer. And definitely not for young Harrison, who had just learned the most powerful lesson of all: that truth, once spoken, can topple even the strongest lies. Harrison appeared at the doorway at the exact moment when emotions in the room were at their breaking point, his small hands clutching a thick stack of documents and a single black USB drive. No one expected a child, especially this child, to walk in carrying evidence powerful enough to expose an entire web of deception, but that was exactly what happened. The room fell into an eerie silence as Harrison stepped closer, each footstep quiet yet heavy with purpose. The papers he held were not childish drawings or random scraps as some might assume. They were printed screenshots, phone logs, saved messages, time-stamped photos, and even handwritten notes he had copied after witnessing suspicious moments that adults ignored. And the USB? That little device held everything Claire had tried so desperately to hide. Audra froze for a moment, unable to breathe as Harrison approached her. When he held out the documents, something inside her broke loose. She dropped to her knees and wrapped her arms around him, not in desperation but in overwhelming gratitude, because in a world where adults twisted the truth, ignored her suffering, and painted her as the villain, it was a child who had stood up for her. Her voice trembled as she whispered thank you over and over, the warmth of his small frame grounding her after days of humiliation and fear. Harrison didn't fully understand the complexity of what he was doing, but he knew one thing with absolute clarity: someone innocent was being hurt, and he could not stay silent. Kyle stood just a few feet away, staring at the stack of evidence with growing horror. Every page Harrison carried was another cut to the fragile trust he had placed in Claire. The USB was the final blow. As the files played on the screen. Claire meeting secretly with Holden, Claire kissing him behind closed doors, Claire referring to Kyle as a temporary stepping stone until her plans were secure. Kyle felt the ground shift beneath him. The relief hit him as strongly as the betrayal. For weeks he had been drowning in self-doubt, wondering if he had done something to push Claire away, if he had misunderstood her emotional distance, if he had invented the unease he felt in his gut. But no. The problem had never been him. It had always been her. A bitter laugh pushed past his lips before he could stop it, and the words spilled out with a force that surprised even him. She should be ashamed. And she should get the hell out of here. This time, no one defended Claire. No one asked Kyle to calm down. No one suggested there might be another explanation. Because the truth was flashing across the screen in unforgiving high definition, undeniable, unfiltered, devastating. Yet Claire didn't flinch. She didn't cry, didn't deny, didn't crumble the way guilty people usually do when their lies are exposed. Instead, she lifted her chin and smiled, a cold, unsettling smile that sent a chill through the room. Holden emerged from behind her like a shadow, hands in his pockets, watching everyone with lazy amusement. They exchanged a look that made Audra's stomach twist. Claire's voice cut through the silence like a blade. You think this is the end? Holden smirked beside her. We're just getting started. And in that moment, everyone knew these two were not scared. They weren't cornered. They weren't broken. They had something else planned, something calculated, something dangerous. Their confidence wasn't arrogance, it was strategy. Audra's moment of vindication, which should have felt victorious, instead filled her with a creeping dread. These were not two people acting on impulse. They were co-conspirators. And whatever came next would be far worse. Kyle, stunned by the shift, found himself drifting inward, questioning everything. The anger was still fresh, but beneath it, confusion churned like a storm. Was he really on the right path? What was he doing with his life? How had he allowed himself to fall so deeply into Claire's manipulations that even his own son had seen the truth before he did? Harrison looked at him with eyes too wise for his age, eyes that asked silently why Kyle hadn't protected himself, why he hadn't protected them. It was humiliating, but it was also awakening. Kyle realized that while he was trying to project the image of a good father, a stable man, a decisive leader, he had slowly become the opposite, reactive, vulnerable, and easily misled by a woman who played on his emotional weaknesses. He thought of Summer, the way she had tried to warn him gently without betraying anyone's trust. He thought of Audra. The woman he once injured emotionally, who had now stood through the worst accusations without a single person defending her. And he thought of Harrison, his son, the person he was supposed to protect, who had instead protected him. That truth crushed him more than any betrayal Claire could inflict. And yet, in the middle of that emotional wreckage, Kyle felt something shift. Something anchor him. Something sharpen him. For the first time in months, he saw himself clearly. Not as the confused man desperately clinging to chaotic love, but as the Abbott heir he was raised to be. Strong. Strategic. Sharp. And now, deeply motivated to make things right. Claire and Holden might think they had the next phase planned, but they had overlooked one crucial detail: Kyle Abbott had finally woken up. And when an Abbott regains clarity, their enemies begin to fall. As Claire and Holden walked out with smug confidence, Kyle understood one truth with chilling certainty. If he didn't reclaim control now, if he didn't step into the role Harrison needed, the role his family expected, the role he should have never abandoned, then the next round of Claire and Holden's plan would cost him far more than pride. It could cost him his son, his family legacy, his future. And so, while Audra held Harrison and whispered her gratitude, while Claire strutted away believing she had the upper hand, while Holden smirked as though he had already won, Kyle stood in the center of the storm and understood that he was done being led. He was done being fooled. He was done being weak. The next move would be his. And it would change everything.